Fantastic. Well, I guess we can go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Alexa Schwartz. I am a staff member in Rice's Office of Alumni Relations. And as you may know, we are all pretty much working virtually from our homes for now, but that doesn't mean that the programming is stopping. We're still here to support you, our alumni community, and the students as well, and all members of the Rice community. This is a collaborative event with the Center for Career Development and Lilly, which is the Liu Idea Lab for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So I'm gonna pass it over to Leora, Caitlin, and Paget just to introduce themselves and share a bit more about their offices, and then we'll hear from our panelists.
Great. Well, I can start. My name is Caitlin Bolaños, and I'm the Senior Associate Director at Lilly, or the Liu Idea Lab for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I'm going to let my colleague Paget tell you a little bit more about what we do for students and both alumni. But we're really excited to co-host this panel today. It's really important for us, for our students, to see how the entrepreneurial mindset translates to a variety of careers beyond just starting companies. And so I'm excited to learn from the panelists today, but I'll let Paget tell you a little bit more about what we do.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. So as Caitlin mentioned, my name is Paget Kern, and I'm a program specialist at Lilly. So a little bit about us. We are about 4 years old now, and we are the home to entrepreneurship and innovation education for students. So our goal, as Caitlin mentioned, is really to equip them with an entrepreneurial skill set and mindset, no matter what industry they want to go to or no matter what they're interested in studying while at Rice. So we offer a variety of programming, including our undergrad and MBA classes. We also recently launched our entrepreneurship minor, and we also host co-curricular activities and events. And of course, we have our co-working space that's on campus. And then specifically for our grads, we connect with them through our alumni base, which is called RAEI, Rice Alumni for Entrepreneurs and Innovators. And for them, we host different events, workshops, and just look to provide resources and support them however we can.
Great, and I'm Leora Gabriel-Semble from the Center for Career Development. Very excited to be here with everyone today for this panel. Our office strives to help all Rice students find and make their place in the world. We serve all Rice undergraduates and graduate students, excluding MBAs, and alumni. So our services are also open to alumni. We provide counseling appointments free of charge to alumni who have graduated within the past 3 years. And there is a bit of a fee for those of you who have been out for longer than 3 years after your first appointment, but you can learn more about that on our website, ccd.rice.edu. And our work with students, again, is to help them figure out what they want to study, what they want to do. And one thing we always encourage students to do is to speak with and learn from their Rice peers and fellow alumni, which is one of the reasons why we were so excited to partner with everyone for this panel today. So to get it started, why not each panelist, you can introduce yourselves, say when you graduated from Rice, what you studied, and a little bit about what you do today. Ryan, you want to get us started?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Ryan Aipperspach. I graduated with a computer science degree from Rice in 2004, and then came out to California and did my graduate work at UC Berkeley, also in computer science and focusing on human-computer interaction. I was at a place called the Berkeley Institute of Design for a few years. And currently, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a company called MD Save, which is based in Nashville, Tennessee, and here in San Francisco. And what we do is we help people who are paying out of pocket for healthcare, either high deductible insurance members or uninsured folks, to have predictable upfront costs when they're shopping for healthcare. So I manage our technology and design teams which is probably 30 some people. We've got a team of engineers actually overseas in Yerevan, Armenia, and then folks in Nashville, San Francisco, and a few spread out across the US. So looking forward to chatting with all of you today.
Great. Karey, you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. Very excited to meet all of you. Thank you for joining us today, too. I'm here out in Raleigh, North Carolina, graduated in 1997, computer engineering major. And then after that, I did management consulting for a few years. So I kind of switched tracks. And from there, last 20 years, I've just worked in a variety of different roles at, I think, 6 different companies now. So hopped around a few different places, done a bunch of different stuff that I'm excited to chat about. I'm currently at Red Hat, which is we make software for enterprises, and it's an open source development model that is super cool. Headed by a former Rice alumni too, Jim Whitehurst, and so it's a fantastic place. We're now part of IBM. I head up the sales incentives portion of Red Hat, so figure out how to motivate and reward our sales teams for getting our software out there and in the hands of customers so they can use it to help grow their companies. So excited to answer questions and just talk more about my experiences.
Great. Ning, you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity inviting me for this event. I went to Wright campus in 1994 from China and had my master's degree in 1997 and then finished my PhD at the end of 1998 in material science and engineering. After that, I worked for Seagate Technology for over 18 years before co-founding a startup company in the machine learning AI space. In the late 2018, I exited from the startup company and joined Qingyuan Venture. So currently, I'm a venture partner at Qingyuan Ventures. We're scanning through the innovation landscape, meeting with different startup companies and funders, and make decisions on investment and also mentoring the entrepreneurs.
And last but most certainly not least, Veronica.
Hey everybody, Veronica Saron, graduated from Rice in 2014, economics major, Will Rice College. When I was at Rice, I co-founded Aipperspach, which is the entrepreneurship accelerator, which also partners with Lily these days, now that the entrepreneurship landscape at Rice has really grown and expanded and changed since I graduated. Upon graduating from Rice, I worked in Deloitte Consulting, so spent a few years in management consulting like Karey did. And then I pivoted into working at a tech company. I currently work at Niantic. I'm the product marketing manager for Pokemon Go. And so it's a very strange situation that I'm in where my passions from the past of procrastinating for studying for economics tests at Rice. So it's funny how your passions can kind of follow you through life and then end up putting you in a job that you could not have imagined at the time of engaging in those passions. So really excited to be here. I wish that there were Zoom chats like this when I was at Rice, which wasn't that long ago, but just the opportunity to hear from different alumni, not only as a panelist right now, hearing from the other panelists, but getting to talk to alumni and current students across the country is really cool. And I do wish that we had this sort of opportunity back when I was a student.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. I know you each shared a little bit about your paths and some of the transitions you made, but maybe now we could go a little bit more in depth. Veronica, we'll start with you, and then other panelists feel free to chime in. But as you mentioned, you majored in econ, started out in the consulting world, and you moved over into the tech sector. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I knew I always wanted to work in tech when I was at Rice. Like I said, I co-founded Aipperspach, did a lot of work there. In fact, I thought I was going to go into tech right away coming out of Rice. But I interned at Deloitte summer before my senior year, and I realized that I still had a lot to learn. I wanted to enter a tech company when I had more of a base, broad business skill set, rather than coming in as an entry-level employee. So that was my hypothesis at the time, that I'd have a so-called more to offer if I started in consulting first. While the job I have right now, I arguably could not have gotten if I hadn't done consulting first. I do think that there's a lot of different entry-level tech jobs I could have done right out the gate at Rice. There's a lot of different coordinator roles, associate manager roles, different internship opportunities that exist in the tech world that I see now as a more mid-level employee. And when I look down at the opportunities that exist, they're definitely there. So the transition for me was just a matter of getting fed up with consulting a few years in, and then looking at different opportunities that I liked. And I applied to a lot of different jobs, explored a lot of different things, talked to a lot of different people in the tech world. And I actually did not start at Niantic. I started at Glassdoor, where I was a senior associate for sales strategy. So I did a lot of work with sales strategy only for a few months before I realized that it really wasn't what I wanted to do. It was very, very analytical, which I can do, and I was good at that in consulting, but it wasn't what I really, really loved. And that was a bit of a painful transition for me, realizing that I had moved out to San Francisco for a particular job and then realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. It's not like consulting where you can jump around from project to project, trying out different things. You get a job and that tends to be the path that you can stay on within the company. And so coming to that realization, reapplying for jobs, finding a job now that I've been in for a few years now and I really, really love. It was quite the journey. But what I would say is that for anybody who does want to get into tech, especially if they're coming out of school or no matter what their background is, as long as you talk to a lot of different people, learn about the different roles that are out there, you can jump into it as soon as you want to, as long as you're finding something that aligns with your interests where you have something to offer.
And then I'm happy to add on just a few things along the same lines of what Veronica said. I think there's kind of this perception, at least that I had when I was an undergrad, that you had to have like this kind of all this knowledge to go in and do a role. And doing management consulting after graduating and doing a startup after that, you kind of learn that, most people don't know that much about the role they're going into, especially early on in your career. And it's mostly just about, especially, Rice, the Rice undergrads who are there now, Rice alum, you're all pretty talented folks. As long as you pursue something and show you're interested in it and show that you're willing to tackle problems and just be intellectually curious, a lot of companies are happy to take a chance on people like that, especially tech companies, I would say. So it's really less about, you don't have to have specifically this kind of special marketing background. If you want to go do a marketing role, just be curious enough, be willing to work at it and learn enough about it that people are willing to take a chance on you. I think, just a couple of jobs that I did out of school after that really showed me that it's okay to not have all that knowledge. Be fearless, go and tackle and take on some roles out there that just you're passionate about.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think another thing I'd add, which is sort of the path I ended up taking, is oftentimes the pathway into a job at a startup is not the typical like send in your resume and have an application and interview with a pool of candidates. It's because startups are small teams, are often very network and relationship driven. So the first startup I did out of grad school at Berkeley was actually a classmate who I just connected with, and I was like, hey, I don't have anything to do this summer. What are you working on? And he was doing a research project on campus that later turned into a startup. So I sort of stumbled into that one and started my career path doing different startups. Another one, I connected with a former coworker. We just were catching up to see how she was doing. She's like, oh, I need a website built. Could you help me with that? And so I think wherever you end up after school, whether it's grad school, consulting, working somewhere, really going out of your way to get to know a lot of different people in the tech or whatever industry you're interested in not with the goal of, hey, I want to go find a job, but just with, there's a lot of interesting people to go talk to. That network will turn into opportunities sometimes when you don't expect it.
I can actually dovetail off of that, Ryan and Karey, with a story. So when I was at Rice, like I said, I thought I was going to go into tech straight out of college. And I think that ultimately, this is my mom. Hi, Mom.
With that.
I'm on a panel right now. Yeah. So coming out of Rice, I thought I was going to go into tech right away. And I just wanted to learn more about the different opportunities that existed in tech. And part of that was because I was interested in it. Part of it was because I was putting together Aipperspach for the first time. And so I reached out randomly to a lot of alumni who I knew were involved in Y Combinator. And this was like 2012. And there was a guy named Brian Armstrong who I reached out to. And he was co-founding a company, and he was messaging me about it because I was asking him questions about it. Turned out that I was in the Bay Area at one point, summer before my junior year, and I reached out to him saying, hey, we've exchanged some messages. Can we with this guy, Brian Armstrong, friends? And he's telling me about his company. It's called Coinbase. It does this thing with Bitcoin, and he's talking about how it's going to change the way money is going to be forever. And I like don't quite understand it, but I'm like, all right, sounds great, Brian. For the next 4 years, 5 years-ish, he would message me on Facebook every once in a while and say, hey, would love to take you on as an intern. Hey, would love to take you on as a salesperson. We just need a generalist. We need someone who's you clearly have a lot of guts to just reach out to different alumni, and you have a lot of hustle. Why don't you come work for us? And I wasn't that interested. I didn't really know quite what he was doing. I was in consulting. But fast forward, Coinbase is like a really ridiculously big, and I reach out to Brian every once in a while, but he's busy. He's got things going on. Point being that it was a really bizarre encounter where I was just really curious as a student. I was reaching out to alumni, and I happened to make a connection with an alum who was pioneering in a new groundbreaking world of cryptocurrency however many years ago. So that is to say, reach out, be curious. It sounds cheesy, but as long as you're interested, you just never know where those kinds of opportunities will pop up.
Yeah, and I can share some of my experience. So if you have continued your graduate study and you become a specialist in certain area, and like the case for me, after I joined Seagate Technology, and then it was fun. There was a lot of cutting edge projects going on. But at a certain point, I started to wondering, how did I handle the things that I don't have a PhD degree in? And then like, how do I approach things, and how do I find the right solution? So I took the path of entering an executive MBA program. And then that way you have learned the kind of systematically learned the knowledge about marketing, sales, strategic thinking, and all the things like beyond your original field of study. And then that really gives me a lot of kind of confidence in handling the new challenges coming in. So then I started looking for opportunities in the startup space, which you really need to looking for kind of how innovative the technology is, and then how sustainable the competitive edge could be. So it did took me about 10 years from my finish of my executive MBA to finding the right startup project to work on, which was fascinating, and it was on the kind of the leading edge of using machine learning, AI to provide industrial solutions. So I think just what I felt that a career path for everyone, it could be, sometimes it is a 100-yard dash, and then sometimes it's a marathon. And then you can prepare for those in different ways, and then eventually find your best sweet spot.
Great. You've all shared, some interesting tidbits about your paths, and you've all touched on this a little bit. You've all had some experience in the startup world. And you talked, a little bit about being nimble and taking on different roles and hats. But for someone considering maybe transitioning to a startup or looking into working at a startup, what would you say some of the most important things to keep in mind are? What are sort of some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks of working at a startup?
I mean, I would say that from my perspective, the biggest benefit of a startup, I think especially earlier in your career, is you get connected to a much broader range of sort of parts of the business than you would at a larger company. So, in my first startup just out of grad school, I ended up, as one of the first few engineers, like being at board meetings and business development phone calls, and also helping to hire people, and also like going to the hardware store and buying whiteboards, like everything, right? And so I think I much more quickly than, say, at a larger company, kind of got that breadth of experience, so that as I moved into more senior roles, I really was well prepared for, a broadening role. The flip side of that is, everyone's doing a bit of everything, and there's not multiple levels of support. So you're definitely a little more on your own in terms of figuring things out. I think at a larger company, there could be management training programs, you might have mentors across the company in different roles, definitely a more formalized sort of leadership structure. So there's opportunity for a lot of breadth, but you're also a little bit more on your own to figure it out, which I enjoyed for sure.
And I can add on to that a little bit. My second job was doing a startup. Three of us worked out of a garage for a few years, raised a bunch of money, and went through it too fast. And so I think my general takeaway from those few years, everything Ryan said, just amazing experience where you get to do way more than you would at a big company. But I think in general, higher highs and lower lows. It's a roller coaster, right? So wherever you are in your stage of life, as long as you're ready for that kind of both emotional, financial roller coaster that a startup will take you through. If you're ready for that and you're willing to take that on, I think it's just probably one of the most unique and rewarding experiences that you can do in your career. And some people worry, oh, if I go to a startup, what am I missing out on? Working at a bigger company. Bigger companies love people coming from startups, and so it's never a bad thing to have on your resume as something that you did is the experiences that you had at a startup. So if you can do it and you can take on the highs and the lows, then I think it's a great thing to do in your career.
To dovetail off of that, a lot of times people will say you can start a startup, but you can't necessarily go from a big company culture to going into a startup. Because when you start at a startup, or if you do startup work early on in your career, it shows that you can, especially if you can stick it out while you're at the startup and it's a great startup, it shows that you can handle high pressure situations, that you can do a lot of different things, that you're willing to work really hard. It shows a lot of different things. But the other nuance I want to just add into this question, which was about what you should think about when you're getting into a startup, benefits and drawbacks, there are a lot of different types of startups out there. And there's probably more startups that exist in the world right now than there ever have been before because of the advent of technology. And so right now I technically work at a startup, but I'm at a Series C startup, which means that it's a mid-level, mid-sized tech company. So the challenges and the opportunities that exist at a company that is about 500 people, I joined when it was a little under 200, now it's 500, they're going to be very different than if you join somebody's startup, which is 1 to 10 people. So for example, when Brian Armstrong was reaching out to me those years ago, that was when Coinbase was about 20 people, 30 people. That's a very different set of a company than if you join it now, where it's in a pre-IPO type of stage. So make sure that if you're interested in the benefits of a startup, that you're evaluating it very four-dimensionally, and that they can all be very different. They have different cultures, they have different sizes, different challenges. But at the bottom line is that if you're working at a company that is anywhere near being a young company, a startup, you will get the opportunity to do way more things and to show that you can flex into a lot of different areas than if you were to join a company that's extremely established and many, many years old.
Yes, and then I think one of the reasons for the startup to exist because it is challenging the status quo and also trying to innovate even at the very front of the new technologies. So it's a very dynamic environment, and I think it's a great place for young people to learn. In my experience, when we had the startup from 3 co-founders growing into over 100 people in 3 years, and I personally hired and interviewed over 100 of employees, and then I definitely can see how the young engineers really contributing to the dynamic culture of the startup. And also, one thing people might want to realize is that the startup is growing, and then the destination of a startup is to become a mature, stable, kind of leading company in certain field. So you will have this growing up pain, and then at a certain point, people have to make the decision that which stage of the company's journey you enjoy most. Does it provide you with the adequate learning, or would you want to migrate to different companies at a different stage of maturity so that you can have broadened the opportunity of learning? So all those things, just I think people joining startup have a very open mind, and I'm sure they will make the right choice along the journey.
Great. Well, thank you all for all that really great information about some of the benefits and drawbacks of working at startups and some things to take into account if one were to consider going to work for a startup. So I think our audience on this call ranges from students to alumni, some who are more recent grads, some who graduated many years ago. There might be some people who already work in the tech sector, but others who are looking to transition in. So if someone was interested in getting into the tech sector, how would they go about marketing their skills to make themselves attractive to a prospective employer? Does anyone have any tips on that?
I can start a little bit just on a different angle, maybe. I think we've been talking a lot about business roles, like strategy and planning and marketing, but there's a whole other side, all the technical roles, the software engineers that are out there. A great way to get into the startup is the open source community. Coming from Red Hat, I didn't realize the power of open source until I joined Red Hat. There's this huge, wonderful community out there developing all the latest, most innovative technology, software technologies, and anyone can get in there and collaborate and contribute to this open source community. And I know a lot of the hiring that people do nowadays, they look for people, so they see what you've contributed to the open source community. And so if you find any great projects you want to jump in on and contribute, your code will speak for itself, right? So it's a great way to get in there, do something meaningful you're passionate about, and get noticed if you want to join various tech companies around the world.
Yeah, and I would say related to that, not necessarily open source, projects, that's kind of a tech specific thing, but whatever role you're looking at, really provide very specific examples of things you've done. I think at a large company, you can go through an interview process and there's screening exercises and lots of opportunities to prove your skills. Startups they're moving too fast and don't have enough people to really do that. So if someone comes to me and says, either here's something I built, you can go look at it, or, hey, I've worked with these companies and I solved this particular problem, or I, raised this much revenue through something I contributed, but like very, very specific examples makes it so much easier to stand out. Because when you're hiring, you want someone who has a proven ability to get things done. And it's much easier to show that than to just talk around it.
I'll put in a little plug for our services here at the CCD. As I mentioned, we do service alumni, and we can help you with your resume or cover letter to help you illustrate some of those specific examples, or even a mock interview if you're trying to prepare for an interview or a more informal conversation with a potential employer. Ning, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just to AngelList is a good website. I'm sure that you probably is also referring those to the people that if you post your resume there, a lot of startup companies might be looking for people, especially very, very early stage, looking for candidates from that platform. And then when you review other peer posting, you might find people of similar interest, and it's also a good place to meet your co-founders or partners down the road.
Great. I know all of you have mentioned the importance of networking or talking to different people as ways of finding jobs at a startup or more advanced companies. So it sounds like, but maybe you can opine on this a little bit more, that networking does play a bit of a role in landing a job in the tech sector. For some people, it can feel difficult to reach out or kind of intimidating. Do you have any tips for people looking to connect with others in the tech sector? Are there any sort of tech-specific ways of going about networking that might be different from other fields?
I can jump into that because I searched and got a job in tech twice, and then I've had people reach out to me with job offers just from networking. So that is not to brag about my abilities in networking. It's just that I'm very curious naturally. I think a lot of people here are curious because we're all Rice alumni and affiliated with Rice. You're going to have so many people here who are curious. So when you show that curiosity, it's great. My recommendation is that you have to show that curiosity in a strategically structured way. So when you're looking into joining a tech company, you could probably bucket it into one of two places. You could either be at a big tech company, so your Googles, your Amazon, your Apples, etc., Netflix. And then you've got startups, which can range from the tiny ones to the mid-stage ones like what I'm at. The reasons for why networking is important for either of those two categories is a little bit different. At a big tech company, it's important because it is so competitive to get into these companies that having somebody who can give you a lot of insights about what's going on at that company, what's important about that company, what's interesting about that role is important. And so you have to have a very strong hypothesis for the kind of role you might want to have at a larger company and test it by talking to people, by reaching out to people. And that may be people who work at that company or people who have that kind of job at another company, so that you know a lot about the type of role you're going up against and the people you're going up against to get a role at one of those large tech companies. When it comes to a startup, you really need to show that you, to Ryan's point, you could do this job, that you can dig in, you can maybe contribute to an open source project. You need to show rather than tell, I would say, when it comes to getting a job at a startup, since it's so much more personal and the companies are smaller and they don't have the resources to screen you. So there's a really great technique that I learned called the Briefcase Technique, and I'll paste a link to a YouTube video about it. This video is a little more geared at negotiating your salary, but the point still stands. You basically want to show that you can do the job even before you go in. So as an example, my own personal example, working on Pokemon Go, a lot of the product managers who've gotten jobs at Niantic working on Pokemon Go since I joined were actually people who they wrote articles on Medium about how they would improve the product management structure at Niantic, or what they would do strategically based on the fact that they loved the product. For me, I just played a ton of Pokemon Go. It was something I was naturally passionate about. It was an IP I was naturally passionate about. And I got the job pretty quickly in product marketing. And I later learned, because I'm friends with my coworkers now, that I differentiated myself on the basis of, one, being a strategic thinker, showing that I had that management consulting background and could think in that way. But I was also the highest who had interviewed for the job. So that sounds really absurd and funny. But the analogy to this is, no matter what job you're interviewing for, especially in the startup world, or if it's for a new innovative product at a larger company, you need to show that you love the product. And by doing that, you show that you love the company and you can do the job. So for me, that was leveling up in Pokemon Go. But for you, that may be, I've used this cloud software for my networking efforts and I really love it. Or I've been investing in cryptocurrency all this time and I use Coinbase because it's so great in these ways. And here's what I wrote up about it and the things that I've learned by using your product. So that will differentiate you, and you learn those things by talking to people.
Yeah, and I think other tools people can utilize to reach out for network beyond their current network structure is LinkedIn. And for example, you can go to Crunchbase and then you can search for the startup companies in different category. And then they also give names of the company's co-founders or key employees. And then you can go to LinkedIn and then look at those people's page and reach out by sharing some of the messages that you would like to convey. So I think that would be a very good way to broaden the network.
In light of COVID and the current situation, I would think obviously attending networking events in person is not something that's really happening right now, and people have migrated maybe to different parts of the country or the world. Do you guys have any thoughts on how the current situation might impact the tech industry? It's often currently centered in San Francisco or in certain locations.
I can start a bit just from from being a Red Hat. Our customers, they're the whole Fortune 2000, so you can imagine it's the impact's been all over the place. Some of our like the airline industry or the financial services industry might be hit a little bit differently. Some industries are growing, right? So it's we're seeing a pretty wide range of impacts by industry. But from a technology perspective, I think a lot of companies are now kind of doubling down and realizing how important that digital strategy is, and so they're moving investments and growing investments and expanding the transformation of their company so that they have a full kind of flexible digital platform, so that as we all grow and hopefully this pandemic goes away sometime soon, but everyone now realizes we need to be ready for the future and that to expect these kind of things. And I think we're all learning so much about different ways companies can operate and still be super efficient and do great things for customers that are different than the way that we've been operating. So it's been a good wake up call to all of us, and I think there will be some companies negatively impacted, but also a lot of growth in the technology segment.
Yeah, and I think it will vary a lot by industry. For us, like I mentioned, our team is in San Francisco, Nashville, and Armenia. So we were on video calls pre-COVID all the time, and it honestly hasn't changed that much. And I think I've heard similar things from my friends who work for big tech companies like Google and Apple. They're pretty easily made the transition to working remotely. We're already, spread out across the world anyway. But on the flip side, my wife is at a biotech startup with, a laboratory with animals and cells and experiments in it. And it's been much harder for them, and they had to figure out how to, physically get back into the lab to make work progress. So I think in some ways the core, software industry is probably the least impacted because our work is digital, we're remote anyway. So there's a lot you can do that you are already doing.
Great. You've all, again, touched on some really interesting and great advice for the participants. If looking at where you are now and how you got there, are there some maybe mistakes you made along the way, mistakes you would avoid, things you would have done differently? if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Stop trying to double major or triple major. That's dumb. Don't do that. Stop trying to be an engineer if you really don't love that type of work. Take more history and liberal arts classes because that's what you actually like doing. And luckily I did take a lot of those, but Rice is such a great place for being able to take a lot of different classes while finishing a major. If you just want to finish the major but really explore a lot of different things, you can do that. And I had a lot of stress in college around like, oh, I got to double major because everybody's double majoring, or I've got to be an engineer because everybody's being an engineer. And like, frankly, I'm very happy with where I am right now, and I'm pretty excited about where I'm going to get to be. And a lot of that is because Rice gives that open curriculum and gives you the opportunity to explore. So take advantage of that, and don't try to be super person here.
Such great advice. The phrase that Ning said earlier, challenge the status quo. I love that phrase because I think when we all graduate, you have this mentality that you're going to go out there and do this stuff, and you're not going to just be encumbered by the way things are done, and you kind of forget, right? As you get kind of entrenched in your role and you start doing things the way everyone else does them, you forget to challenge the status quo. And I think Rice alum especially, you get Rice undergrads, we're all great at that. So I think looking back, I think me personally, I could have done that more in more situations, and I think it's just a great thing to keep in the back of your mind that anytime you can improve things and push people around you to do even better, that everyone will ultimately appreciate it.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to call a lot of decisions to be a mistake, and maybe think about the analogy of less is more. I remember when I was graduating with a PhD, I was thinking, oh, should I go into industry, or should I go turn around get an MBA and then do consulting, or go to Wall Street, and then like all those options are kind of flowing around. But if I look back in the past 20 plus years, and then the things you wanted to do at your early stage of your career, you eventually will have the opportunity to revisit and then get it done. I did get an MBA after working for the company for over 6-8 years, and then you can bring a lot of real life work experience into the learning process, and then really thinking about how to make a leap from there. And then I did enter the venture capital world after working for a Fortune 500 large company, and then also co-founding a startup. So that it's kind of naturally the venture companies start to reach out to people with such background. So then the career change happened very naturally. So again, I think just life is a long journey, and the career development is one part of it, and just enjoy every turn you're taking in your life.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add is I learned probably it took like a decade in startups to really realize that the team you're building, especially if you have a startup that has some success and starts to grow, the team you're building is really important. And if you're an early employee at a startup and you choose to go down that path, your job will pretty quickly become not, building a product anymore, but building a team. And so taking the time to learn about leadership and management, which is, you could go to business school to do that. You could read about it. You could just find mentors to help you out. But really investing as much in those people skills and relationship skills as you do in growing your technical skills is really valuable as your startup continues to grow.
Great. I think we'll now start with some of the questions that we've received. So one person mentioned that you talked a lot about all of the different things that, you know, can happen at a startup, how there can be some stressful situations. Do you have any advice for how to handle some of those stressful situations that you might encounter in the startup world?
I think it's just how you would deal with stress anywhere, but in particular in the startup world, it's really hard to not over-identify the work that you're doing with your self-worth, because especially if you're an early stage employee at an early stage venture, you have a lot of vested interest financially and emotionally in the startup. And so having that barrier between where you start and where you end, and the fact that it is just a job, is really important. It's easier said than done, but I think that that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, and I think when deciding to take a job at a startup, it's very important to really look at the culture of the company, look at the work-life balance that they have, and there's all different kinds, right? Some startups are like work nonstop, 7 days a week, and really go all at it. Some say, you know, we have a lot of people with families, and it's important to find that balance. There's not a wrong answer, but finding the fit with where you are and what's important to you will really impact your success and your happiness. So ask a lot of questions of people as you're trying to make a decision, and understand, you know, not just is this company doing something cool, but is the culture something that would fit with my values and what else is important to me.
Great. Our next question is about whether or not the panelists agree that every company is a startup in the beginning, but that not every startup company maintains the same culture as it expands and possibly turns into a more corporate setting in the later stages. Is the ultimate goal of every tech startup to expand in size or industry or customer segment, or all of the above at some level?
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. I think there's sort of this growth curve that happens, and as your company gets bigger, you have more employees, you need more structure, because managing 500 people is not the same as managing 4 people. There's no way around it. And so some of that change happens. I think it varies widely how much a company's culture changes, but definitely it happens, and that's why you see, you know, there are people in Silicon Valley who all they do is jump from, you know, 5-person startup to 5-person startup, and when the company gets bigger, they're like, that the stage I enjoy is over and I'm moving on. There's kind of a middle growing stage, and then there really is the big company stage. So I think being aware of those transitions as they happen is important. And you might find that you enjoy parts of all of them, and you might find that there's one that is really your sweet spot. So definitely a reality.
Yes, this question reminds me of one lecture in the series of a Stanford course about entrepreneurship and startups. I think those were probably in 2016, 2017 timeframe. And they had the analogy for a startup growing from kind of a tribe, a village, and then becoming a city, or maybe later become a nation. And then those transitions are critical for the company's success and growth. And it also have a huge impact on the employees. And then at those pivoting points, the company could experience a lot of up and downs, rotation of leadership, some revelation of big issues, and then fix of the issues, just thinking about what happened in Uber, etc. So so I think it's good the process for people to eventually solidify his or her own value system, and then you have always think about what is the value you hold strongly for, and what would be the things that differentiate you and others, or differentiate your choice with the company versus other opportunities. So I think working in a startup company is a process constantly challenging people's thinking. Sometimes people didn't realize that because the work is the pace is so fast, and then there's so much work to do. But sometimes take a step back and then think about those anchoring questions in life is important.
Great. Another question is, for those who want to work in a business role in the tech space, if you are an international student, or someone, maybe you're no longer a student, but someone in the US who would require some sort of sponsorship or visa to continue working here, do you have any special tips for that population, or for ways to determine whether a company is open to hiring?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just to be upfront about it. So, in the startups I've worked at least, it's never been an impossibility to hire someone who would need visa sponsorship or anything like that. It certainly is, a bit of a higher hurdle, so you have to be really qualified for the job. But what you don't want is to get halfway through an interview process and then say, oh, by the way, you're going to have to fill out a visa application, and the startup may not be able to do that for whatever reason. So I think pairing, like I said earlier, examples of your qualifications. Here's these things I've done that would make me really successful, and just be upfront about it and have a discussion at the beginning of the process to make sure that everyone's always on the same page.
Yeah, so to sponsor the international visa was not a major concern in the case of my previous startup, because there are a lot of immigration law firms that was fully capable of handling those. And then I think the company would be looking for technical expertise, and then sometimes those expertise happen to be heavily populated with certain ethnic groups. So we did hire a lot of people from China, from India, and so it's a great experience working with them. And as Ryan said, bring this issue up front, and usually the company will tell you right away if they are experienced in handling the situation or not.
Great. This next question, I think, is actually a fabulous question. And I'm hoping that each one of our panelists can share their insight. As you progress throughout your careers, what are some characteristics of people or coworkers that you've really enjoyed working with? And maybe what are some characteristics that have been less favorable? What makes you successful working alongside others in the startup space?
I think the thing that unifies all the people that I've really enjoyed working for is probably twofold. First, they're really good at listening. It's a very underrated skill. I'm trying to become a better listener myself. When I was in management consulting, there was a structure that we had to use whenever we were going into a client, and that was understand the current state, figure out what the future state is going to be, and then the path to get between the two. And that was so overused, it became really cheesy how that structure was applied to everything. But it's that first step, understanding the current state, that really stuck with me. And not just in in a business clinical sense of understanding the current state, but understanding where a person is emotionally, like what is their current emotional state, where is their mental state right now. And the people who are able to pick up on those things extremely quickly and translate that into recognizing and hearing people and seeing what problem is really coming from, those are the people who I've found have been the most successful. So that's the first piece. The second piece that I found is people who they don't take themselves too seriously. And so I work in gaming, in AR, at that intersection of gaming and AR. And it's funny how there's a lot of people who like take things extremely seriously, and they come in and they're like, oh, like, how are we going to do this? Oh, I don't know if I like that. And they just get really, really uppity sometimes. And this is not just on my team. This is just like extended throughout all of the different external organizations I may work with. And it's funny because it's like, I work on a Pokemon game and it's awesome and it's fun and it's great. And whether you're working on something as wacky as what I get to work on, or something that is quite serious, like what Ryan works on, which is healthcare, if you take yourselves too seriously, you're not going to see where the solutions are. You have to be able to, part of being innovative and thinking outside of the box is not taking the current state so seriously. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin, being able to recognize and see what's going on and being open to it, while also being open to possibilities and not taking things too seriously and having fun with it.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me in the people I've enjoyed working with the most is those that really take ownership of problems and solve them. And what I mean by that is, again, at a startup, resources are really constrained. Everyone's trying to do lots of different things. And so when something needs to be solved, whether it's how to build a marketing campaign, how to do some analytics, how to build a piece of software, having someone who's like, all right, I got that. I'm going to go do the research I need to do, ask questions if I need to, and come back with an answer, rather than saying, all right, I did step one. What's step two? Come tell me what I should do. Okay, now what's step three? There's just not enough time or bandwidth to really do that. And so having a team where everyone sort of takes their direction and then is able to run with it, it's just more fun because you're all focused on getting things done. Another thing that's actually worth looking at is Amazon has a set of leadership principles. I think there's 8 to 10 of them that talk about skills of good leaders that they look through in all their recruiting and interviewing. And a lot of those are really, really helpful. One is getting things done and being sort of self-sufficient. One is being, willing to take risks. So certainly anything on that list is a good skill of someone that's worth focusing on.
I think creative thinking is something very important and it can be helpful for the team. So I really enjoyed with the UI UX designer in my previous startup company because in the meeting, for example, you can imagine there are back-end engineer, front-end engineer, and then there's product managers, and then sometimes it is the creativity that's coming from the discussion that really glue the team together and or reshape a new direction, and also make it fun to work on the project even in a very stressful situation. So I think always have a creative mind and enjoy all the creative ideas is a wonderful thing for all the colleagues to have, and that would really help the team building process as well.
Hi, this is Karey. I'm joining back in on voice. My technical expertise and my battery power was not very good, so.
Karey, thank you for joining us again. If you missed the question, we were talking about what are some of the characteristics that you sort of have made your colleagues successful, or that you've the people that you've enjoyed working with the most, what are some of those characteristics that they've had?
Yeah, you know, the one I will add, I think I heard most of the, you know, of course, some great insights from the other panelists. The one thing I'll add is just when you really value the diversity of ideas, I think it really shows through in how you contribute. I think the folks that I really enjoy working with are the ones who take that little extra step to realize that, you know what, there's no way I know how to do this on my own, and they're willing to reach out, get ideas from other folks, especially other folks with different backgrounds, you know, who maybe different roles altogether, and willing to take all that, ingest it, and come out with something that really is different because it's not done in the same way that we've done things in the past. So just really valuing diversity of ideas and investing the energy to create something that's built on those ideas.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing all of your insights and advice with fellow alums, students, and university staff members. It's really been great to hear from all of you about all of your diverse experiences. As I mentioned earlier on, here at the Center for Career Development, we are eager to help students and alumni find their place in the tech world, if that is what is of interest to them. You can learn more on our website, which is ccd.rice.edu. We use something called Handshake as our platform for job searching, scheduling appointments with our career advisors, and it also gives you access to a lot of different resources to which we have subscriptions. There's no cost to creating a Handshake account. All students already have accounts. Alums, if you're interested, you can learn more in the link that Alexa posted in the chat. Or you can always shoot us an email at ccd@rice.edu. We also have a new website that recently launched, and on our career cluster pages, you can learn a little bit more about some resources that are specific to the tech industry. So feel free to be in touch with any questions that you might have. We are here to assist you virtually all year long. A lot of students in particular think that we are off all summer, but we are all here, well, at least here working remotely and available via Zoom, Skype, email, or whatever your preference is for virtual communication. And now I'll let my colleagues over at the Lilly Lab share a little bit more about their offerings.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So something I wanted to mention is that here at Lilly, with our alumni base, we have plenty of alumni that want to help each other, that want to help current students. So if you're interested in a certain industry and you want to talk to a professional in that field, or maybe you're looking for a mentor or office hours to talk with somebody in the real world, feel free to reach out to myself or to Caitlin, or check out our website, because we're more than happy to connect you no matter where you are in your student career or in your current career.
Great. I was busy pasting the links into the chat. I just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone who was able to attend, and to applaud all of our panelists from wherever you are. With the Office of Alumni Relations, we are continuing our virtual programming, which has been a really exciting time for us. I'll include a link in the chat for some of our virtual programming. We have a webinar coming up tomorrow focusing on the impact of COVID-19 on K-12 and higher education with alum David Mansouri. There's also going to be a summer cocktail mixing class later that evening, so feel free to join us then. And I'd also just like to say that you know, we've talked a lot about the importance of the Rice Network and reaching out to alumni, and so I'd encourage you, if you haven't already, to create a Sally Portal profile. It's Rice's online professional development and mentoring platform. It's a place where you can really either look for help and advice from the Rice community, or offer help and mentorship and give your expertise to others. And I'll include that link in the chat as well. We'll be sharing the recording of the session when it's over, or when it's over, of course, when it's ready, and I'll also be including any of the links that were mentioned in the chat in our follow-up email. Again, thank you so much to everyone who attended today, and special thank you, of course, to our incredible panelists and moderator and staff. So thank you so much. And I guess we'll sign off. Thank you, and hope to see you at another virtual event coming up soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.